I was taken to the hospital with a severe headache. I called everyone, children, daughters-in-law, and grandchildren. No one came. My DIL replied, "Family vacation, don't bother us." When they finally came to the hospital, they found only a note revealing, "I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached." The pain hit me like a sledgehammer to the skull at 3:47 a.m. I remember the exact time because I was staring at the digital clock on my nightstand, willing myself to breathe through what felt like my head splitting open. At 66, I'd experienced my share of headaches, but this was different. This was the kind of pain that made you wonder if you were dying. My hands shook as I reached for my phone. The first number I dialed was Miles, my only son. It went straight to voicemail. His voice, cheerful and automated, told me to leave a message and he'd get back to me soon. Soon, as if a medical emergency could wait for his convenience. "Miles, it's Mom," I whispered into the phone, my voice barely recognizable even to myself. "I'm having severe head pain. I think I need to go to the hospital. Please call me back." 20 minutes passed. No call. The pain was getting worse, spreading down my neck like molten metal. I tried calling again. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. I dialed Jovi, my daughter-in-law. She'd never been warm to me, but surely in an emergency. The phone rang 4 times before she picked up, her voice sharp with irritation. "Marlene, do you know what time it is?" "Jovi, I'm sorry to wake you, but I'm having terrible head pain. I think I need to call an ambulance. Is Miles there?" There was a pause, and I could hear muffled conversation in the background. Then Jovi's voice came back, colder than I'd ever heard it. "We're on a family vacation, Marlene. We specifically came here to have uninterrupted time with the kids. Please don't call again unless someone is literally dying." The line went dead. I stared at my phone, the words echoing in my head. Family vacation. The grandchildren I helped raise. The son I'd sacrificed everything for. Were on a family vacation. And I wasn't family enough to be included, or even worthy of concern when I might be dying. I called 911 myself. The paramedics found me on my kitchen floor, having collapsed while trying to make it to the front door. The ride to the hospital was a blur of sirens and concerned voices asking me questions I could barely focus on answering. Did I have emergency contacts? Yes, I gave them Miles's number. Any other family? Just him and his wife. At the emergency room, they ran test after test. CT scan, blood work, neurological exams. The doctor, a kind woman about my age named Dr. Peterson, sat beside my bed with results I couldn't quite process through the medication they'd given me for pain. "Mrs. Hartwell, you've experienced what we call a severe tension headache, possibly triggered by extreme stress. Your blood pressure was dangerously high when you arrived. We're going to keep you overnight for observation." I nodded numbly. "Did anyone call my son back?" Dr. Peterson's expression softened with sympathy. "The nurse tried the number you gave us several times. No answer." That's when it truly hit me. I was alone. Completely, utterly alone. The hospital room was quiet except for the rhythmic beeping of monitors and the distant sounds of the hallway. I lay there in the dim light, staring at the ceiling tiles and thinking about how I'd ended up here. When had I become so disposable to the people I loved most? A nurse named Maria came to check on me around midnight. She was probably in her 40s, with kind eyes and gentle hands as she adjusted my IV. "Are you comfortable, Mrs. Hartwell? Do you need anything for pain? Have there been any calls for me?" Maria shook her head sympathetically. "I'm sorry, honey, but you try to get some rest. Sometimes family doesn't know how to handle these situations, but I knew better. This wasn't about not knowing how to handle it. This was about not caring enough to try. I must have dozed off, because the next thing I knew, sunlight was streaming through the window and a different nurse was bringing me breakfast. My phone sat silent on the bedside table. No missed calls. No text messages. Nothing. As I picked at the hospital eggs, a terrible clarity began to settle over me. This wasn't an aberration. This was the truth of my relationship with my son and his family, stripped of all the pretty lies I'd been telling myself for years. They didn't need me. They never had. I was just the convenient grandmother who babysat when they wanted date nights, the reliable mother who helped with down payments and emergencies, the dependable woman who asked for nothing in return except to be included, to be loved, to matter. But I didn't matter, not to them. The realization should have broken me. Instead, something unexpected happened. For the first time in years, maybe decades, I felt a strange sense of clarity. The fog of constant people-pleasing and desperate hope lifted, and I could see my life with brutal honesty. I had been living for other people's approval for so long that I'd forgotten who I was underneath all that servitude. I'd given away pieces of myself until there was almost nothing left. Almost, but not quite nothing. Not yet. When Dr. Peterson came for her rounds, she found me sitting up in bed, more alert than I'd been since arriving. "How are you feeling this morning, Mrs. Hartwell?" "Different," I said honestly. "Doctor, when you have a patient with no family support, what do you recommend?" She studied my face carefully. "Are you asking hypothetically?" "No. I'm asking because I think I'm about to become that patient." Dr. Peterson pulled up a chair beside my bed. "Mrs. Hartwell, I've been practicing medicine for 23 years. I've seen a lot of family dynamics. What I can tell you is that you can't control how other people treat you, but you can control how you respond to it. And if I'm tired of responding by pretending it doesn't hurt, then maybe it's time to stop pretending." As she left the room, I reached for the pen and notepad the hospital had provided. My hand was steady now, steadier than it had been in months. I had some serious thinking to do, and for the first time in my adult life, I was going to think about what I wanted, not what everyone else needed from me. The family vacation would end eventually. Miles and Jovi would come back, probably expecting to find the same agreeable, available mother and grandmother they'd left behind. They were going to be very surprised. The memories came flooding back as I lay in that hospital bed, each one a piece of a puzzle I'd been too close to see clearly. How had I become the family ATM without even realizing it? It started slowly, as these things always do. When Miles first brought Jovi home 8 years ago, I was thrilled. My son, 32 and finally settling down with a beautiful, ambitious woman who seemed to adore him. I wanted so desperately to be the mother-in-law I'd never had. Supportive, helpful, but not intrusive. Jovi was smart about it. She never asked for money directly, never made demands. Instead, she painted pictures of dreams just slightly out of reach. Their first apartment was almost perfect, but just a little over budget. Their wedding would be exactly what we want, if only we could afford the venue we really love. I wrote check after check, telling myself I was investing in their happiness. When they bought their first house, I contributed $20,000 toward the down payment. "Just a loan, Mom," Miles had said, hugging me tight. "We'll pay you back as soon as we're settled." That was 7 years ago. The loan was never mentioned again. When little Emma was born, I was over the moon. My first grandchild, a perfect little girl with Miles's eyes and my stubborn chin. I volunteered to help with childcare, driving the 40-minute round trip to their house 3 times a week so Jovi could go back to work part-time. "You're such a lifesaver, Marlene," Jovi would say, already grabbing her purse as I walked through the door. "Emma just went down for her nap. There are bottles in the fridge. I'll be back around 5. I loved those days with Emma. I'd hold her while she slept, sing the same lullabies I'd sung to Miles, and dream about all the ways I'd spoil this precious child. When she took her first steps, it was in my living room, her chubby little hands reaching for me. I was the first to see it, and my heart nearly burst with pride. But when I excitedly called Jovi to share the news, her response was ice cold. "She's been practically walking for weeks at home, Marlene. You probably just didn't notice because she's more comfortable with us." That should have been my first real warning sign, but I pushed it down. New mothers were protective, I told myself. It was natural. When Tommy came along 2 years later, the pattern intensified. Now I was watching both kids 3 days a week, plus most Saturday nights when Miles and Jovi wanted to go out. I was buying clothes, toys, paying for swimming lessons and toddler gymnastics because money is just so tight with 2 kids. The kids loved me, and I lived for their excited squeals when I arrived. Emma would run to me with artwork from preschool, and Tommy would climb into my lap with his favorite book. I was Grandma Marlene, the one who always had snacks and hugs and infinite patience. But I started noticing things. How Jovi would correct the children when they got too affectionate with me. How she'd subtly redirect their attention when they asked to call me during the week. How family photos at their house featured her parents prominently, but mine were tucked away in a drawer. "The kids are getting too attached to you," she told me one day, completely matter of fact. "It's not healthy for them to prefer their grandmother over their parents." I was so taken aback I couldn't respond. Prefer me? I was just loving them the way grandmothers do. But Jovi made it sound like I was overstepping, being inappropriate somehow. That's when the rules started. I could only take the kids to pre-approved activities. I needed to check with Jovi before buying them anything over $10. Family traditions I'd hoped to share, like baking Christmas cookies or taking them to the zoo, had to be cleared through her first. Miles, my sweet boy who used to tell me everything, became increasingly distant. Conversations with him felt scripted, like he was reciting talking points Jovi had prepared. He stopped calling just to chat. He stopped asking my advice about anything. Our relationship became transactional. He needed something, he called. Otherwise, silence. The breaking point should have been last Christmas. I'd spent weeks planning a special day for the kids, homemade stockings, a treasure hunt, their favorite breakfast. I'd even bought a small Christmas tree for my apartment so they could help decorate it when they spent the night on Christmas Eve. Christmas Eve came and went. No call. Christmas morning, I sat alone in my apartment, surrounded by wrapped presents and cooling cinnamon rolls, waiting for them to arrive. At noon, I finally called. "Oh, Marlene." Jovi's voice was bright and breezy, with the sound of children laughing in the background. "We decided to have Christmas morning just as our immediate family this year. You understand, right? The kids need to learn that Christmas is about family time." Family time? I was family, wasn't I? Or was I just the hired help? I spent that Christmas day alone. And for the first time, I let myself cry about it. Really cry. Not the quiet tears I'd been pushing back for months, but deep, heartbroken sobs that came from somewhere I'd been ignoring. But even then, I convinced myself it was a misunderstanding. Maybe I'd been too pushy, too involved. Maybe they needed space to build their own traditions. I could be patient. I could wait. The requests for help kept coming, though. Could I watch the kids while Jovi went to a spa weekend with her friends? Could I contribute to Tommy's preschool tuition? Could I help with the down payment on their new SUV? Each time I said yes, each time, I told myself this was what loving families do for each other. Each time, I pushed down the growing feeling that I was being used. 3 months ago, things escalated in a way that should have opened my eyes completely. Jovi's mother, Sandra, was visiting from Arizona, and I was excited to finally spend time with her. We'd only met briefly at the wedding, and I thought it would be nice to have another grandmother to share stories with. I invited everyone for Sunday dinner, my famous pot roast, homemade rolls, apple pie. I spent all Saturday cleaning and cooking, wanting everything to be perfect. They arrived an hour late, no apology, no explanation. Sandra swept into my home like she owned it, immediately critiquing everything from my decor to the way I'd set the table. "Oh my," she said, eyeing my small dining room. "This is cozy. The kids must feel so cramped here compared to their beautiful home." During dinner, she regaled us with stories of her other grandchildren, the ones who lived near her in Arizona, the ones she saw all the time, the ones who were so much more advanced than Emma and Tommy. "Of course," she said, cutting her pot roast with theatrical difficulty. "When you're really involved in your grandchildren's lives, you can see the difference it makes." I felt every word like a slap. Miles sat silently, not defending me or correcting the obvious slight. Jovi smiled and nodded along, encouraging her mother's cruel comparisons. The worst part came when Sandra pulled out her phone to show off photos. Picture after picture of family gatherings, holidays, birthday parties, all featuring her front and center with the Arizona grandchildren. Professional family portraits where she stood proudly beside the parents, clearly acknowledged as an important part of the family. "We do a big family vacation every year to Colorado," she announced, All the kids and grandkids together. It's such a wonderful tradition. Emma looked up from her plate. Grandma Marlene, why don't you come on vacations with us? The silence that followed was deafening. Jovi and Sandra exchanged a look that spoke volumes. Miles stared at his plate like it held the secrets of the universe. Well, sweetie, Jovi finally said, her voice sickeningly sweet. Grandma Marlene has her own life to live. She doesn't want to be bothered with family trips. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell Emma that I'd never been invited, that I'd love nothing more than to make memories with her and Tommy. Instead, I sat there like the fool I'd become, smiling and nodding and pretending it didn't cut me to pieces. Now, lying in this hospital bed, I could see the pattern with brutal clarity. I wasn't family, I was staff, convenient when needed, dismissed when not. The money I'd given them, the time I'd spent caring for their children, the pieces of my life I'd sacrificed, none of it had earned me a place at their table. I was the grandmother they tolerated because I was useful, not because I was loved. The phone beside my bed remained silent. No concerned calls from Miles, no worried text from Jovi asking about my condition. The family vacation was more important than whether I lived or died. For the first time in years, I saw my situation with complete honesty. And for the first time in years, I began to imagine what my life could look like if I stopped begging for crumbs of affection from people who saw me as nothing more than a convenient resource. The anger that had been building inside me for months finally found its voice. Not rage exactly, but something colder and more purposeful. A determination that surprised me with its strength. I reached for the notepad again. I had some planning to do. The second night in the hospital, I couldn't sleep. Not because of pain this time, but because my mind was working in ways it hadn't in years. I felt like I was seeing my life through different eyes, and what I saw made me sick to my stomach. Maria, the night nurse, found me sitting up at 2 a.m., writing furiously in my notepad. "Can't sleep, honey?" she asked, checking my vitals with practiced efficiency. "I'm making lists," I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. "What kind of lists?" I looked down at the pages I'd filled. Everything I've given them. Everything I've done for them. Everything I'll never do again. Maria paused in her work, studying my face. Family troubles? Family realizations. I set down my pen and met her eyes. "Maria, can I ask you something? If you gave and gave to people who only took and never gave anything back, what would you call that relationship?" She was quiet for a moment, then sat on the edge of my bed. I'd call it unhealthy, and I'd ask why the person was allowing it to continue. What if they were the only family you had? Honey, family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up when you need them. She gestured around the empty room. Who showed up for you? The simple question hit me like a physical blow. Who had shown up? Dr. Peterson, who'd taken time to really listen to me. Maria, who treated me with more kindness in 2 days than my son had shown in years. The paramedics who'd rushed to help a stranger. Even the hospital chaplain who'd stopped by earlier to check on me. Not one of them was related to me. Yet they'd all shown more concern for my well-being than my own family. "I think I've been confusing obligation with love," I said quietly. Maria nodded. "That's a common mistake, but it's never too late to learn the difference." After she left, I went back to my lists. The first one was titled, "What I've Given." By the time I finished, it covered 3 pages. Money, time, energy, opportunities I'd passed up, relationships I'd neglected, dreams I'd abandoned. The total was staggering. The second list was, what I've received in return. It was embarrassingly short. A few obligatory thank yous, some staged family photos, access to grandchildren who were being taught to see me as secondary to their real family. The third list was the most important. What I want for the rest of my life. This one was harder. I'd been so focused on what everyone else wanted for so long that I'd forgotten how to want things for myself. But slowly, carefully, I began to write. I wanted to travel. I'd always dreamed of seeing Italy, but every time I'd saved enough money, some family emergency had required my funds. I wanted to take an art class. I'd loved drawing as a young woman but gave it up when Miles was small and never picked it up again. I wanted to make friends who valued me for who I was, not what I could provide. Most of all, I wanted to stop living my life on the margins of other people's happiness. By morning, I had a plan. Not a vengeful plan or a dramatic confrontation, but something quieter and more powerful. I was going to reclaim my life, piece by piece, starting immediately. Dr. Peterson arrived for rounds at 7 a.m., finding me dressed and sitting in the chair beside my bed, my notepad clutched in my hands. "You look different this morning, Mrs. Hartwell. How are you feeling?" "Clear-headed. Doctor, I need to ask you something. How much time do I have?" She frowned, concerned. "I'm sorry, what do you mean?" "I'm 66 years old. I've wasted years trying to buy love from people who were never going to give it to me. Assuming I stay healthy, how many good years do I have left to live for myself?" Dr. Peterson's expression softened with understanding. "Mrs. Hartwell, you could have 20 or 30 good years ahead of you. Maybe more. Are you thinking about making some changes?" "I'm thinking about making all the changes." She sat down across from me. "Can I give you some advice? I see a lot of patients in your situation. People who've spent their lives taking care of everyone else until they wake up one day and realize they've forgotten to take care of themselves." I nodded, hungry for any wisdom that might help me navigate what came next. The ones who thrive are the ones who stop apologizing for wanting their own happiness. They stop explaining their decisions to people who never had their best interests at heart. They just begin. Begin what? Begin living like their life matters. Because it does. After she left, I called the hospital's patient advocate. I needed information about changing my emergency contacts, updating my healthcare directives, and several other legal matters I'd never thought about before. Within an hour, I had a list of attorneys and financial advisors who could help me restructure my life. My next call was to my neighbor, Eleanor. We'd been friendly for years, though I'd never had time to deepen the relationship because I was always running to help Miles with something. "Marlene, I heard you were in the hospital. How are you feeling?" "Much better, thank you." "Eleanor, I have a strange question. Would you be interested in taking a trip to Italy with me?" There was a pause. "Italy? Are you serious?" "Completely serious. I've always wanted to go, and I think it would be more fun with a friend." "Oh my goodness, yes. I've been dreaming of Italy for years. When were you thinking?" "Soon. Very soon." We talked for 20 minutes, and I found myself laughing for the first time in months. Eleanor was excited, full of ideas about places to visit and things to see. She didn't ask why the sudden plan or whether my family approved. She just shared my excitement, and it felt wonderful. My discharge paperwork arrived that afternoon. The social worker, an efficient woman named Carol, reviewed my aftercare instructions and medications. "Do you have someone who can check on you for the next few days?" she asked. "I'll be fine on my own." "What about family support?" I met her eyes steadily. "I'm learning to support myself." Carol studied me for a moment, then made a note in my file. "Mrs. Hartwell, you seem like a very strong woman. Trust your instincts." As I gathered my few belongings, I felt lighter than I had in years. The headache was gone, my blood pressure was normal, and for the first time in decades, I felt like I was in control of my own life. I took a taxi home instead of calling Miles. The ride gave me time to look at my neighborhood with fresh eyes. I'd lived in the same house for 15 years, ever since my divorce, but I'd never really appreciated it. It was a sweet little cottage with a garden I'd neglected because I was always at Miles's house helping with the children. Inside, everything looked different too. The furniture I'd bought for visits from grandchildren who rarely came. The guest room I'd prepared for family who never stayed overnight. The kitchen where I'd cooked countless meals for people who took my efforts for granted. I walked through each room, seeing it not as a waiting room for other people's approval, but as my space, my sanctuary, my home. The first thing I did was unplug the landline phone. If Miles wanted to reach me, he could call my cell, but I wasn't going to sit by a phone anymore, hoping for calls that might never come. The second thing I did was pull out the folder of travel brochures I'd been collecting for years. Italy, France, England, Ireland. Places I'd dreamed of seeing but never prioritized because family always came first. Not anymore. I spread the brochures across my kitchen table and began planning the trip Eleanor and I had discussed. 2 weeks in Italy, starting with Rome and working our way through Tuscany. I could afford it easily now that I wasn't funding other people's dreams. As evening approached, I felt a familiar anxiety creeping in. This was usually when I'd call Miles to check in, when I'd ask about the kids, when I'd offer to help with whatever crisis had emerged that day. Instead, I poured myself a glass of wine, something I rarely did because Jovi had once made a snide comment about grandmothers who drink. I sat in my garden, watching the sunset paint my neglected flowers in golden light, and allowed myself to feel proud. I'd survived a medical emergency on my own. I'd made plans that excited me. I'd begun to imagine a life that revolved around my own happiness instead of everyone else's convenience. My phone sat silent beside me, and for the first time, that silence felt like peace instead of rejection. Tomorrow, Miles and Jovi would return from their family vacation. Tomorrow, they'd probably expect to find the same accommodating mother and grandmother they'd left behind. Tomorrow, they were going to discover that I was no longer available for that role. The position had been permanently eliminated. Tonight, I was going to enjoy my wine, plan my Italian adventure, and go to bed early without worrying about anyone's needs but my own. It felt revolutionary. The call came on Tuesday morning, exactly 1 week after my hospital stay. I was in my garden, actually gardening for the first time in years, when my phone rang. Miles's name appeared on the screen, and I felt the familiar lurch in my stomach that his calls always provoked. For a moment, I considered not answering, but curiosity won out. I wanted to hear what he had to say after a week of radio silence during my medical crisis. "Hi, Miles. Mom, we just got back from Cabo. It was incredible. The kids had such a blast at the resort." His voice was bright and cheerful, as if nothing had happened. "How have you been?" I sat back on my heels, dirt still under my fingernails, and marveled at his complete obliviousness. "I've been in the hospital, Miles." "What? When? What happened?" The concern in his voice might have fooled me a week ago. Now it just sounded hollow, performative. "Last Tuesday night. Severe headache, dangerously high blood pressure. I was there for 2 days. "Oh my God, Mom, why didn't you call me?" I almost laughed. "I did call you, multiple times. You didn't answer. We were on vacation, Mom. You know how spotty cell service can be at resorts. I also called Jovi. She told me not to bother you unless someone was literally dying." There was a long pause. I could practically hear him scrambling for an explanation that would make this seem reasonable. "Well, you're okay now, right? I mean, you sound fine." "I'm fine, Miles. No thanks to you." "Mom, don't be like that. We didn't know it was serious. If you had known it was serious, what? You would have cut your vacation short? You would have rushed home to make sure I was okay?" Another pause. "Of course we would have." But his voice lacked conviction, and we both knew it. "I need you to come over this weekend," he continued, changing the subject with practiced ease. "Jovi's parents are visiting again, and we're having a big family barbecue. The kids have been asking about their grandma Marlene. The old me would have said yes immediately, grateful to be included, eager to prove my worth as a grandmother. The new me heard something different in his invitation. "What do you need me to bring?" "Well, you know how much everyone loves your potato salad, and maybe some of those brownies the kids like? Oh, and could you pick up a case of beer on your way over?" There it was, the real reason for the invitation. I wasn't being invited as a beloved family member. I was being assigned tasks, like the hired help. "No, Miles." "No, what?" "No, I won't be coming to your barbecue." I could hear the confusion in his voice. "Why not? Are you still not feeling well?" "I'm feeling better than I have in years, actually. I'm just not available to be your party planner anymore." "Mom, what's gotten into you?" "It's just a family barbecue." "Is it? Because it sounds like you need me to provide food and drinks for your wife's parents. That's not family time, Miles. That's catering." "That's not." "Mom, you're being ridiculous. We're not asking you to cater anything. We just thought you'd want to contribute." "I have contributed, Miles. For 8 years, I've contributed money, time, childcare, and emotional labor to your family. I'm done contributing. The silence stretched between us, heavy with things neither of us had ever said out loud. What do you mean you're done? I took a deep breath, feeling calmer than I had any right to feel during such a conversation. I mean, I'm done being taken for granted. I'm done being the family ATM. I'm done begging for scraps of affection from people who only call when they need something. Mom, that's not fair. Miles, when was the last time you called me just to talk? When was the last time you asked how I was doing without needing something from me? When was the last time you included me in family plans instead of assigning me homework for them? He couldn't answer, and that was answer enough. I'm taking a trip to Italy next month, I said, surprising myself with how good it felt to say it out loud. Eleanor and I are going for 2 weeks. Italy? Mom, that's a lot of money. Are you sure you can afford that? The question was so predictable, so telling, that I actually smiled. I can afford it easily, now that I'm not funding other people's dreams. What's that supposed to mean? It means I'm done, Miles. Done paying for your mortgage, your cars, your children's activities, your family vacations that I'm not invited on. You're 39 years old. You can pay your own bills. Mom, we never asked you to. You didn't have to ask. You just took. And I gave because I thought that's what love looked like. But it wasn't love, was it? It was transaction. I gave you money and time and devotion. And in return, you gave me just enough attention to keep me invested. That's not true, isn't it? Miles, I was alone in a hospital room for 2 days last week, and not one of you cared enough to check on me. But here you are today, asking me to bring potato salad to your party. The anger was finally creeping into his voice. You're being unfair. We care about you. No, Miles. You care about what I can do for you. There's a difference. So what, you're going to punish us, cut us off because we went on vacation? I'm not punishing anyone. I'm simply choosing to live my life for myself from now on. What about the kids? What about Emma and Tommy? That question hit differently than the others. The kids were innocent in all of this, and I loved them desperately. But I also knew that loving them didn't require me to continue enabling their parents. I love Emma and Tommy. I always will. But I won't be available for babysitting anymore. I won't be contributing to their activities or expenses. If you want them to have a relationship with me, you'll need to facilitate that without expecting me to provide services in exchange. Mom, this is crazy. You're their grandmother. Yes, I am. And if you'd like me to continue being part of their lives, you'll need to treat me like family instead of staff. I could hear Jovi's voice in the background, sharp and angry. Miles was clearly relaying bits of our conversation to her. Jovi wants to talk to you, he said. I'm sure she does, but I'm done talking for today. Miles, I love you. I always have. But I love myself too, and I'm finally ready to act like it. Mom, don't hang up. We need to figure this out. There's nothing to figure out. This is how things are going to be from now on. You can accept it or not, but you can't change it. I hung up before he could respond, then immediately turned off my phone. My hands were shaking slightly, but it was adrenaline, not fear. I'd just set the first real boundary of my adult life, and it felt terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. An hour later, my doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and saw Miles standing on my porch, his face flushed with anger. Jovi was beside him, her arms crossed and her expression thunderous. I considered not answering, but this conversation needed to happen eventually, and I was as ready for it as I'd ever be. Hi, Miles. Jovi. I kept the door partially closed, not inviting them in. Mom, we need to talk about this, Miles said, his voice tight with barely controlled frustration. I think I've said everything I need to say. Jovi stepped forward, her voice sickeningly sweet. Marlene, I think there's been a misunderstanding. We're family. Family works things out. Are we family, Jovi? Because family members generally show concern when someone is hospitalized. Family members include each other in important events. Family members don't treat each other like hired help. Her mask slipped slightly. You're being dramatic. So we went on vacation and didn't check our phones constantly. That doesn't mean we don't care. You didn't just not check your phones. You specifically told me not to call unless someone was literally dying. Well, I could have been dying, and you didn't care. Miles jumped in. Mom, we care. Of course we care, but you can't expect us to drop everything every time you have a headache. A headache? I stared at him in disbelief. Miles, I was hospitalized for 2 days with dangerously high blood pressure. This wasn't a headache. This was a medical emergency. But you're fine now, Jovi said dismissively. So what's the big deal? That question crystallized everything for me. These people who I'd sacrificed so much for genuinely couldn't understand why being abandoned during a medical crisis was a big deal. The big deal, Jovi, is that I finally see clearly. I see that I've spent 8 years trying to buy my way into a family that never wanted me in the first place. That's not true, Miles protested, but his voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? Miles, answer me honestly. If I stopped giving you money, stopped babysitting, stopped providing services, would you still want me in your life? The pause before his answer told me everything I needed to know. Of course we would. But Mom, relationships are about give and take. You're right. They are. And for 8 years, I've given and you've taken. It's time for that to change. Jovi's patience finally snapped. You're being selfish, Marlene. The children need their grandmother. The children need a grandmother who's valued for who she is, not what she provides. They need to see healthy relationships modeled for them. What they don't need is to watch their parents exploit someone who loves them. Exploit? Miles's voice rose. Mom, we never exploited you. Everything you did, you offered to do. You're right. I did offer, because I was desperate for your love and acceptance, and I thought if I just gave enough, did enough, sacrificed enough, you'd finally see me as worthy of being included in your family. I took a breath, feeling remarkably calm despite the intensity of the conversation. But I don't need to earn love anymore. I'm going to Italy with Eleanor. I'm taking art classes. I'm going to live the life I put on hold while I waited for you to decide I was good enough. So that's it? Jovi's mask was completely gone now, her voice sharp with anger. You're just going to abandon your responsibilities? My only responsibility is to myself. You're both adults. You can handle your own responsibilities. They left angry, and I knew they'd be back. But for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of their anger. I wasn't going to try to fix it or smooth it over or find a way to make them happy with me again. I was finally free. The harassment started the next day. At first, it was just phone calls. Miles would call every few hours, his tone alternating between angry and pleading. When I stopped answering, Jovi took over, leaving voicemails that grew increasingly desperate and manipulative. Marlene, this is ridiculous. The children are asking where Grandma Marlene is. Do you really want to hurt innocent children because you're having some kind of midlife crisis? I deleted each message without fully listening. But by Thursday, they'd escalated. I was in my garden again, transplanting some roses I'd neglected for years, when my neighbor Eleanor appeared at the fence between our yards. Marlene, honey, is everything okay? There's been a strange woman sitting in a car outside your house for the past 2 hours. I looked toward the street and saw Jovi's silver SUV parked across from my driveway. She was sitting in the driver's seat, talking animatedly on her phone, occasionally gesturing toward my house. It's my daughter-in-law, I said, brushing dirt from my hands. We're having a disagreement. Eleanor frowned. She's been taking pictures of your house, and she followed you to the grocery store yesterday. I saw her in the parking lot when I was leaving. A chill ran down my spine. I'd noticed the SUV yesterday but thought it was coincidence. The idea that Jovi was actually following me, documenting my activities, felt invasive and slightly menacing. Eleanor, if you don't mind me asking, do you have a security camera on your front porch? Yes. Why? Would it capture anyone coming to my front door? Absolutely. Marlene, are you in some kind of trouble? I looked at my kind neighbor, this woman who'd shown me more genuine concern in the past week than my own family had in years. I don't know yet, but I might need to ask a favor soon. That evening, the doorbell rang at 8 p.m. I checked the peephole and saw Miles standing there alone, holding Emma and Tommy's hands. The children looked confused and a little scared. My heart broke instantly. Whatever game Miles and Jovi were playing, they were using the children as pawns. I opened the door, kneeling to the children's level. "Hi, sweetheart," I said to Emma, then smiled at Tommy. "What are you doing here so late? Daddy says you don't want to see us anymore," Emma said, her voice small and worried. "Did we do something bad?" I looked up at Miles, fury building in my chest. "You told them what?" "I told them the truth. That Grandma Marlene is too busy with her new life to spend time with family." I stood slowly, my hands clenched at my sides. "Miles, how dare you use these children to manipulate me? I'm not manipulating anyone. You said you weren't available for babysitting anymore. You said you were done with family obligations. These kids don't understand why their grandmother suddenly doesn't want them around." "Because that's not what I said, and you know it." I knelt back down to the children. "Emma, Tommy, I love you both very much. I will always love you. But Daddy and Mommy and I need to work out some grown-up problems before we can have our fun times together again." "Are you mad at us?" Tommy asked, his bottom lip trembling. "Oh, sweetheart, no. I could never be mad at you. This isn't about you at all." I looked back up at Miles. "You need to leave. Now. And you need to stop using your children as weapons." "They miss you, Mom. They don't understand why you're acting like this." "Then maybe you should explain to them that relationships require respect from everyone involved. Maybe you should tell them that Grandma Marlene loves them but won't be taken advantage of anymore. So you admit it. You're abandoning them. I'm setting boundaries, Miles. There's a difference." After they left, I called my attorney. The consultation I'd scheduled for next week suddenly felt too far away. Friday morning brought a new development. I was getting ready for my art class, something I'd been looking forward to all week, when Eleanor knocked on my door. "Marlene, I think you need to see this." She handed me a piece of paper she'd printed from her computer. "Someone's been posting things about you online." I stared at the Facebook post, feeling sick to my stomach. It was from Jovi's account, and it had been shared dozens of times. "Heartbreaking situation with my mother-in-law. After everything our family has done for her over the years, she's decided to cut us off completely. She won't even see her own grandchildren anymore. We're trying to understand what we did wrong, but she won't talk to us. Please keep our family in your thoughts during this difficult time." The comments were brutal. People I didn't even know were calling me selfish, heartless, a terrible grandmother. Several people had shared their own stories of ungrateful elderly family members who'd turned on their families. "There's more," Eleanor said gently. She posted photos of the children looking sad, saying they keep asking where Grandma Marlene went. I handed the paper back to Eleanor, my hands shaking with rage. She's trying to publicly shame me into compliance. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to my art class, and then I'm going to talk to my lawyer." The art class was exactly what I needed. For 3 hours, I lost myself in watercolors and charcoal, surrounded by other people who were there simply because they wanted to create something beautiful. Nobody knew about my family drama. Nobody needed anything from me except my presence and participation. My instructor, Patricia, was a woman about my age who'd started painting after her retirement. During the break, she sat beside me as I worked on a landscape. "You have a natural eye for color," she said. "Have you painted before?" "Not since I was young. I always meant to get back to it, but life got in the way." Life has a way of doing that. But it's never too late to reclaim the things that bring us joy. Her words stayed with me as I drove to the lawyer's office that afternoon. David Morrison was the kind of attorney I'd never imagined needing, someone who specialized in family harassment and elder abuse. His office was warm and professional, and his manner was both kind and businesslike. "Mrs. Hartwell, I've reviewed the materials you sent over, the financial records, the social media posts, the documentation of the stalking behavior. This is unfortunately more common than you might think. Is what they're doing illegal? Some of it is in a gray area. The following, the taking pictures of your property, the online harassment, these could potentially constitute stalking or cyberbullying, depending on how far they escalate. But more importantly, you have every right to set boundaries with your family, regardless of what they're posting online. What can I do to protect myself? Several things. First, I recommend getting a security system for your home. Document everything. Every unwanted visit, every harassing phone call, every social media post. Keep a detailed log with dates and times. He handed me a folder. I'm also going to draft a cease and desist letter. This will formally notify them that any further harassment, stalking, or attempts to contact you against your wishes could result in legal action. Won't that just make them angrier? Probably. But it will also make it clear that you're serious about your boundaries, and it creates a legal paper trail if we need to pursue restraining orders later. The weekend was blissfully quiet. Miles and Jovi seemed to be regrouping, and I used the time to install the security cameras David had recommended and to continue planning my trip to Italy with Eleanor. On Sunday evening, I was reading a travel guide about Tuscany when my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but I answered anyway. Is this Marlene Hartwell? The voice was elderly, female, and unfamiliar. Yes, who is this? My name is Dorothy Stevens. I saw the posts about you online and I wanted to reach out. My stomach dropped. I'm sorry, I don't understand. Dear, I went through something very similar with my own family 5 years ago. Different details, but the same pattern. Adult children who took and took until I had nothing left to give, then tried to destroy my reputation when I finally said no. I sank into my chair, not sure whether to hang up or keep listening. I know you don't know me, but I wanted you to know that you're not alone, and that it gets better. What happened with your family? Oh, they fought me for about 6 months. Tried every manipulation tactic in the book, but eventually they realized I wasn't going to cave, and they moved on to their next target, my sister, actually. She lasted about 2 years before she figured out what they were doing. Do you ever see your grandchildren? There was a pause. No, dear. And that was the hardest part. But I realized something important. Children learn by watching. If I had stayed and allowed myself to be treated badly, what would I have been teaching them about how to treat people they love? After Dorothy hung up, I sat in my living room thinking about her question. What had I been teaching Emma and Tommy all these years? That love meant allowing yourself to be used? That family could treat you however they wanted as long as they occasionally included you? Maybe stepping away, as painful as it was, would teach them something more valuable in the long run. Monday morning brought the cease and desist letter. David called to let me know it had been delivered. I expect they'll respond within a few days, he said. Be prepared for them to escalate before they back down. He was right. By Wednesday, my security cameras had captured Miles trying to peek in my windows. Jovi had created a fake Facebook account to send me harassing messages, and someone, probably Miles, had left a bag of garbage on my front porch with a note that said, "This is what you are." I documented everything, just as David had instructed. And with each incident, my resolve grew stronger. They thought they could break me down, force me back into compliance through sheer exhaustion and social pressure. They thought I'd cave rather than endure their campaign of harassment. They were wrong. For the first time in my life, I had something worth fighting for. My own dignity, my own peace, my own right to be treated with basic human respect. And I wasn't giving that up for anyone. 6 months later, I stood on a terrace in Tuscany, watching the sun set over rolling hills dotted with olive trees. Eleanor was beside me, both of us holding glasses of Chianti and laughing about our attempt to order dinner in broken Italian. I can't believe we actually did this, Eleanor said, her face glowing with happiness and wine. When you first suggested this trip, I thought you were having some kind of breakdown. Maybe I was, I said, thinking about the woman I'd been just half a year ago. The best kind of breakdown. The harassment from Miles and Jovi had continued for about 3 months after the cease and desist letter. They'd tried everything. Showing up at my house with the children, sending flying monkeys in the form of distant relatives to guilt me, even attempting to report me to Adult Protective Services for elder abuse against myself. That last one had backfired spectacularly. The social worker who came to investigate found a healthy, happy woman living independently and making rational decisions about her own life. She'd actually ended up recommending resources for me to protect myself from family harassment. The turning point came when Dorothy Stevens, the woman who'd called to support me, introduced me to a small group of women who'd all experienced similar situations with their families. We started meeting monthly, just for coffee and conversation, but it became a lifeline. There was Margaret, whose 3 sons had systematically isolated her from friends and activities while draining her retirement savings. There was Patricia from my art class, who'd discovered that her daughter had been forging her signature on checks for years. There was Alice, whose son-in-law had convinced her daughter that Alice was too negative and needed to be cut off from the grandchildren unless she became more supportive of their choices. What we all had in common was that we'd been trained from childhood to believe that family loyalty meant accepting mistreatment. We'd all confused enabling with love, sacrifice with devotion. "You know what I realized?" Margaret had said during one of our coffee meetings. "I spent so much time trying to be the mother they wanted that I forgot to be the woman I needed to be." That sentence had stuck with me through everything that followed. The social media campaign against me eventually died down when people started asking uncomfortable questions about why adult children would publicly shame their elderly mother instead of handling family issues privately. A few of my old friends reached out after seeing the posts, and I was surprised to discover that several of them had suspected Miles and Jovi of using me but hadn't known how to bring it up. "We could see you getting smaller and smaller," my friend Janet told me over lunch, "like you were disappearing into their needs and demands. We worried about you, but every time we tried to say something, you'd defend them." She was right. I had defended them, even when their behavior was indefensible, because admitting the truth would have meant facing how completely I'd lost myself. The real breakthrough came when Emma, now 8 years old, somehow got my phone number and called me directly. "Grandma Marlene, why don't you come to see us anymore?" My heart had nearly broken. "Oh, sweetheart, it's complicated grown-up stuff." "Are you mad at Mommy and Daddy?" I'd thought carefully before answering. "I'm not mad, Emma, but sometimes grown-ups need to have space from each other to work out their feelings." "Mommy says you don't love us anymore." The cruelty of that lie had taken my breath away. "Emma, I want you to listen to me very carefully. I love you and Tommy more than you can possibly understand. I will always love you. But loving someone doesn't mean letting them treat you badly. I don't understand. Someday when you're older, you will. And when you do, I hope you'll remember that Grandma Marlene chose to love herself too." After that conversation, I'd made a decision that surprised even me. I'd hired David Morrison to help me establish a trust fund for Emma and Tommy's college education, money that would be available to them when they turned 18, regardless of their parents' behavior. "I want to make sure they have options," I'd explained to David. "And I want them to know that their grandmother thought their future was important, even if I can't be part of their childhood." Now, 6 months later, I was living a life I'd never imagined possible. The art classes had led to a small showing of my work at a local gallery. I'd sold 3 paintings, not for life-changing money, but for the pure joy of knowing that someone else found beauty in something I'd created. Eleanor and I had become true friends, not just neighbors. We took day trips to museums, tried new restaurants, attended lectures at the community college. I'd joined a hiking group and discovered I actually enjoyed physical challenges when they weren't being imposed on me by other people's demands. My health had improved dramatically. The headaches were gone, my blood pressure was normal, and I slept better than I had in years. My doctor said I looked like a different person, younger, more energetic, genuinely happy. "It's amazing what happens when you remove chronic stress from your life," she'd observed during my last checkup. The house felt different too. I'd redecorated, getting rid of furniture I'd bought with other people's comfort in mind, and replacing it with things I actually liked. The guest room was now my art studio. The kitchen table where I'd once sat waiting for phone calls was now covered with travel brochures and art supplies. I'd even started dating, something I'd never thought I'd do at 66. Richard was a widower I'd met in my hiking group, a gentleman who'd also learned the hard way that sometimes you have to choose between people-pleasing and self-respect. "The thing about having difficult adult children," he'd told me over dinner last week, is that you spend so much energy trying to fix the relationship that you forget there are other relationships possible. He was right. I'd been so focused on earning love from people who were incapable of giving it that I'd missed opportunities for genuine connection with people who actually valued me. On our last day in Italy, Eleanor and I took a cooking class in a small village outside Florence. Our instructor, a woman named Lucia who was probably my age, told us about her philosophy of cooking. "You must cook with amore," she said, gesturing expressively. "But amore for yourself first. If you do not value what you create, how can you share it with others?" That evening, as we sat in our hotel room packing for the flight home, Eleanor looked at me seriously. "Marlene, can I ask you something? Do you ever regret it? Walking away from your family?" I thought about her question as I folded the beautiful scarf I'd bought in Rome, an indulgence I'd allowed myself without guilt for the first time in years. "I regret that it was necessary," I said finally. "I regret that Miles learned to see love as transaction, and that Jovi never learned to value people for who they are instead of what they provide. I regret that Emma and Tommy are growing up watching their parents treat people badly." I paused, looking at the photos from our trip scattered across the bed. "But I don't regret choosing myself. I don't regret discovering that I'm worth more than what I can give to other people." What do you think will happen when you see them again? Because you will, eventually. Maybe, but if I do, it will be as equals, or not at all. I'm done begging for crumbs of affection from my own family. 3 weeks after we returned from Italy, the test came. Miles called, the first time I'd heard from him in months. "Mom, I think we need to talk." His voice was different, less demanding, more hesitant. "What about, Miles?" "About everything. About how things went wrong. Jovi and I have been talking, and we think maybe we didn't handle things well." I was quiet, waiting for the rest. "The kids miss you. We miss you. Maybe we could start over." "Start over how?" "I don't know. Maybe we could have lunch sometime? Just talk?" The old me would have said yes immediately, grateful for any acknowledgement, any opening. The new me considered carefully. "Miles, I'm willing to have a conversation, but I need you to understand that I'm not the same person I was before. I have boundaries now, and I won't negotiate them away to keep peace. I understand. Do you? Because this isn't about you apologizing and me going back to being available for whatever you need. This is about building a completely different kind of relationship, if we're going to have one at all." There was a long pause. What would that look like? It would look like mutual respect. It would look like you valuing my time and feelings the same way I value yours. It would look like me being included in family decisions that affect me, not just assigned tasks to support decisions you've already made. "Mom, I think I'm starting to understand what you've been trying to tell us." "I hope so, Miles. Because I love you, but I love myself too, and I won't sacrifice one for the other anymore." We agreed to meet for lunch the following week. I had no idea what would come of it, and for the first time in my life, that uncertainty didn't terrify me. I had built a life I loved, filled with people who valued me for who I was, not what I could provide. Whatever happened with Miles and his family, I would be fine, better than fine. I would be free. As I hung up the phone, I looked around my art studio, at the paintings I'd created, the travel photos on the walls, the evidence of a life lived for my own joy and fulfillment. At 66, I'd finally learned to love myself enough to demand that others do the same, and it had made all the difference. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below, and meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.